Good evening. If you're like me, you know that maybe the past, I don't know, week, maybe 2 weeks, your mailbox has been full of a lot of invitations to be going to a lot of churches for this day, what's marked on the calendar for today. A lot of people have rented out stadiums to have a special service on this day marked as Easter Sunday. And a lot of places also send out the mails and they rent out special places for the Christmas service, right? And so I've gotten all the invitations to go to all of the Easter services and all of the stadiums and all of the sunrises. And here at the Santa Clara Church of Christ and also at Fremont Church of Christ, where I was visiting this morning, although we don't celebrate Easter necessarily, we can probably recognize that this is usually a Sunday where we get to have some special visitors because people feel obligated to come to church on a day that's marked Easter or on a day that's marked Christmas. In fact, when I was filling up the communion in the back when I got here, I felt like it was extra empty of a tray and had to put a few more in there. Days like today, when we're expecting some visitors, it's almost a guarantee that we're going to have a guest. We realize that this is our opportunity. This is one of the best opportunities that we have to do some sort of evangelistic work, to really get engaged with somebody and get them engaged in who God is. And our hope is that they're not coming here and then they leave and we never see them again. But realistically, that's actually the reality of what happens. People understand that this day is marked on the calendar. They'll show up to the building knowing something about Jesus, knowing an obligation that they have, but leave without realizing there is a full change to be had in their entire life. There's something more than just this one Sunday. There's a whole new life, a whole different life to be able to have, and that's all because Jesus was resurrected from the dead. The resurrection of Jesus should change everybody's lives, including our own. Our lives should be changed because Jesus lives. We've been singing about it all night tonight. As mysterious as the resurrection is, we can only understand how much has been fed to us about what a resurrection is. The disciples themselves, Jesus would tell them, I'm going to suffer, I'm going to die, and then I'm going to be resurrected. But their understanding of what it meant for somebody to come back to life, especially Jesus, could only go so far because it was hidden from them. You see that here in Luke chapter 18. In fact, it's probably much like our understanding of the resurrection that will happen after this life. We look at passages like 1 Corinthians and we're wondering, will our bodies look like this? Will we be able to communicate just like this? Like, what's this really going to be like? Our understanding only goes as far as we can read about it and imagine about it. For the disciples, after Jesus actually did rise from the dead, he gave them this full knowledge and awareness. He let them understand the scriptures, as you see here in Luke 24:44 to 47. What was written in the law of Moses, the prophets, the Psalms must be fulfilled. Then he opened their minds, and the understanding of the scriptures came to them. Thus it is written that the Christ should suffer and on the third day rise from the dead, and that repentance for the forgiveness of sins should be proclaimed in the name of all the nations, beginning from Jerusalem. Now, the disciples that had spent so much time with Jesus actually have an awareness of what a resurrection was, the resurrection of Jesus. And just like it was for the disciples, a life-changing moment when Jesus finally gave them the instruction that they needed, especially on that third appearance, we should have our lives changed because of the resurrection. And if our lives are not changed, if our lives look very little different from before we knew Christ, then maybe we should re-examine what the resurrection actually means to us. To fully understand this, I want to observe the disciples. Let's look at the disciples and the impact of the resurrection based on what it was like when they were first called by Jesus to be disciples. Then let's take a little bit of a look at those first two appearances after Jesus had resurrected. And then let's look at that third appearance that comes at the end of John and see really how much change was found by the disciples. The call of the disciples in Luke chapter 5 that we just read about is a story that will also mirror the third appearance of Jesus. It's like when you watch a movie and the movie starts in one place, and then when you get to the end of the movie, like the last scene of the movie is the same thing as the first scene. The people are back in the same place where they had met each other, and you're like, oh, this movie has like kind of two bookends. The call of the disciples and the third appearance of Jesus mirror each other, kind of like that sort of a movie event. In Luke chapter 5, verse 1, it says this: On one occasion, while the crowd was pressing in on him, that is Jesus, to hear the word of God, he was standing by the lake of Gennesaret. And he saw two boats out by the lake, but the fishermen had gone out of them and were fishing with their nets. Getting into one of the boats, which was Simon's, he asked him to put out a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the people from the boat. And when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, Put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch. And Simon answered, Master, we toiled all night and took nothing, but at your word I will let down the nets. It's interesting here that Simon will refer to Jesus as Master. You see that Jesus is teaching and people are coming to hear the word of God. And so there's an understanding, probably by Peter as well as the rest of these people, that Jesus is somebody important. If he has the words of God and people want to hear it, and Peter is recognizing this and letting him into his boat, this must be the man that I'll listen to. We did this all night, Jesus, and came up with nothing. But Master, because you say so, I'll put down the net. Verse 6, and when they had done this, they enclosed a large number of fish, and their nets were breaking. They signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both the boats, so that they began to sink. But when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. For he and all who were with him were astonished at the catch of fish that they had taken. And so also were James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, Do not be afraid. From now on, you will be catching men. And when they had brought their boats to the land, they left everything and followed him. In this story here, I want you to remember a few things about the call of the disciples in this incredible event right here. First, I want you to remember that these fishermen were out all night and caught nothing. And then at the command of Jesus, they let down their net and brought up a catch that was so great, it was incredible. And I want you to remember that in this story here, the net almost broke, the ships almost sank. And I want you to remember that Simon pleads for Jesus to go away from him because he recognizes his sin. And I also want you to remember that these disciples, when they had been called, they left everything to follow Jesus. Because we're going to compare these to the third appearance of Jesus, and when Jesus revisits them in this same body of water, and you see this same story almost play out. But for right now, let's stay in this story and let's look at these two very important things that Jesus says. First, he says, Follow me, after they get back to the shore. And then he says, I will make you fishers of men. Depending on which account that you're in, we're going to go with the Matthew one that says, I will make you fishers of men. Two important parts of the calls of the disciples here. And the first one being, Follow me. What Jesus is going to do is he's going to take this group of men and he's going to teach these disciples about who he is and what he does. These men are going to learn from Jesus. They're going to learn about Jesus. They're going to spend lots of time together. And who knows if they ever revisit fishing again like they do on this day right here. But all we know is they get to have a lot of personal time learning about what Jesus says, what Jesus likes, what Jesus teaches, what Jesus is all of the time. Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life, and we have believed and have come to know that you are the Holy One of God. You see how they've been learning? They've learned about Jesus and they realize this Jesus is the Messiah. Not only will Jesus bring them into an education, but he will take their education and he will apply it. I will make you fishers of men. What you know about me, I will equip you. What I teach you, you will be able to teach. And what you're going to do is instead of fishing a whole bunch of fish, you're going to bring in a whole bunch of people. You'll see the education that Jesus gives them applied, limited in the limited commission for one part, but then in a greater understanding, in a greater way at the Great Commission. They will learn about Jesus and they will get to apply the education that Jesus has given them. They'll leave their boats and forsake everything to be with Jesus. And so they get to learn about Jesus. They get to spend a lot of time with Jesus. They get to hear Jesus say, I'm going to be betrayed and I'm going to suffer and I'm going to die and then I'm going to resurrect, and they're not going to understand what it means. And then the time will happen when Jesus is crucified. The disciples will be away. Peter will deny who Jesus is. And then the tomb will be empty, but they still will know that this is just a mysterious event and we're not exactly sure what all we can do with knowing what we have known about Jesus, what Jesus had taught us. They'll see the empty tomb and Jesus will appear to them in the upper room, and Thomas will doubt, and then Jesus will be there and say, look at my hands, look at my side, place them here, and then they will believe. But in these two appearances, Peter, the one that was called, the one that was told to follow me, the one that said, I will make you a fisher of men, Peter, the one that will deny Jesus, even in these two resurrections appearances, will not get to confront what he had done to sin against Jesus. It will probably be really awkward for Peter knowing that the Lord that he denied, that is now living, has appeared to them, and they haven't got to have this confrontational talk where Peter had sinned against Jesus directly and the air was not clear. They had also have all of this knowledge about Jesus, but they just aren't sure exactly what to do with it. And so they return back to the sea. John chapter 21, this is where we get to understand all of the similarities. First, we had noticed that the disciples had been fishing off this area right here, the Lake of Gennesaret. Here's the Sea of Galilee, and now they will be here in Tiberias. Same area, Galilee. Same lake, and they'll be doing the exact same thing. John chapter 21, verse 1 says this: After this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. It seems that they went from Jerusalem, they went back home. And he revealed himself in this way: Simon Peter, Thomas, called the twin, Nathanael of Cana, Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and the two others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, I am going fishing. They said to him, we are going with you. They went out, got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. They're going back to where they're from. They're going back to what they do. They're going back with the people that they all started with. And then we get to see the exact same situation play out. They'll fish all night, but they'll catch nothing. Verse 4, just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, children, have you any fish? They said to him, no. He said to them, cast the net on the right side. So they cast it. And now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved, therefore, said to Peter, it is the Lord. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work. And the disciples came into the boat, dragging the net full of fish, and Peter had thrown himself into the sea and had swam to Jesus. The other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, about 100 yards off. And when they got out onto the land, they saw a charcoal fire in the place, and the fish laid out on it with bread. Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish that you have just caught. So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of fish, large fish, 153 of them. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. You see, in this event, though, we have some differences. The net doesn't break. There's no ship to sink. And instead of saying, depart from me, Lord, Peter swims to Jesus. He can't wait to be with him now. Before the disciples really understood about the resurrection, they returned to be almost exactly who they were before they were called. It almost seems like they were going to have no change except just an awareness and a knowledge of this Jesus and that he was now alive. But for Peter, this resurrection was vital because he knew that he had sinned against the Lord and he needed that to be confronted and taken care of because Peter hadn't sinned against anybody else except God. And so it's to God that he needs to go to get this cleared up. And so he swims to Jesus. And Peter will find redemption. You'll see that Jesus and Peter will have this exchange. Simon, do you love me? Simon, do you love me? Simon, do you love me? And Peter will say, you know I love you. You know I love you. Lord, you know all things. And Jesus will say, follow me again, but with a more intense desire to truly follow me. This time, Peter, when you go fishing for men, don't break the net and sink the ship by denying me. This time, Peter, you can try to bring in all of the men into my kingdom. But if you deny me, the fish will get away and the ship will go down. This time, Peter, you found redemption. Truly follow me. The resurrection to Peter was redemption. The disciples will come and have a breakfast with Peter, and then once again, with this great catch of fish, they'll leave the boat, they'll leave the net, and then in verse 20 to 25, you see that they're going to follow Jesus again. Twice. Once at their original calling, and now at this third appearance of Jesus, will they abandon this great catch of fish in their boats to once again follow Jesus. But this time, they'll be in Jerusalem. And once it's revealed everything that Jesus is, they're going to have a brand new purpose and a brand new direction of life. Now they're going to be missionaries, preachers. They can't wait to talk about what Jesus has done for them. They're going to have a brand new identity, not just fishermen anymore, but disciples of Christ, Christians, ones that truly love the Lord, and they're going to have not just the knowledge, they're going to be able to take the knowledge that they've had with Jesus and put it into application. The resurrection for the disciples was completely life-changing of everything that they were. This is where they find redemption. This is where they find a purpose. This is where they find a new life. And this is where they find application to the knowledge that they've received about the one they've been following all of this time. Just like it changed the disciples' lives. The resurrection should be a turning point of our lives. Knowing Jesus shouldn't be just a knowledge that's been put into us, a knowledge that we get just from reading about Jesus. The knowledge of Jesus and his resurrection should be the point that turns us from knowledge into action. And that action is probably different for a lot of people. But that action is life-changing, purpose-changing. The resurrection of Jesus, first of all, means the burden of sin, like a net full of fish that's going to break the net and sink the ship, is something that can be brought to Jesus, and your head can be pulled above the water because he will take the burden. The redemption of Jesus, the resurrection of Jesus is not just redemption, but this is the moment where we take what we know about Jesus and we put it into action. This is where we understand what Jesus did for sacrifice. We also use an example to be a sacrificing people. This is where we take what Jesus has taught us and we deliver to other people that they would know more. This is where we take what we know and we begin to serve, and the resurrection of Jesus should call us to serve. And the resurrection to you might mean that it's time to serve even more. The resurrection of Jesus to you should also mean, or could also mean, that you've been looking for freedom and redemption, but can't find it until you bring everything to Him. In 2000, and I guess this was 2021, one morning, really early, Courtney and I got up. This was before we were married. We got up really early and we drove to Yosemite. People have been telling us about Yosemite forever. We've wanted to see it. We watched the Free Solo movie with Alex Honnold, and it was beautiful. We went and we saw the water, we saw the trees, we saw the sun shining, we saw all the traffic, we saw people that were in our way that had been pulled off the road because they were taking the same pictures that we were taking. And everybody had told us about this, and we were finally getting to see it. And then the main event came where we got to go and we got to see Half Dome from really far away. Just look how magnificent this picture is. This looks like it's the tallest thing that's around. The sky is blue, and this dome is just barely touching the sky. And we're high enough, but it looks like this dome is even higher than we are. Before being in this moment right here, when I took this picture and all of the other pictures, I could only imagine what Yellowstone was like. I could only imagine what Yosemite was like before I'd been there. And it was grand when we finally got there. I can tell you to imagine what it's like to find relief by bringing your burdens to Jesus and letting Him take them away. But imagining that and being told that is different from actually experiencing it yourself. I can tell you what it's like to realize that there is a new purpose to be found when you want to serve Jesus as a priority of all things of your life. That some things need to be abandoned like a boat and a net to find a new service with God. I can tell you to imagine how freeing that is, but it's different to experience it. And only you can choose to experience it instead of imagine it. I can tell you to imagine how greater the kingdom would be if you would take up where it's needing the service and where you can find purpose in that, but it's different when you actually get to experience what it's like to have a fulfillment and purpose in serving where God needs you to serve. Just like hearing about Half Dome and seeing Half Dome are two totally different things. The resurrection of Jesus should change you to want to find redemption and actually move to finding it. The resurrection of Jesus should move you from knowing you should serve into serving. The resurrection of Jesus should call you to abandon the things that are in your way and that could hold you back and hold you down into following Jesus, finding a purpose in Jesus, a greater purpose. If you're subject to the invitation call, there's no better night than tonight to lay your burden before Jesus and find redemption. There's no better night than tonight to give your life to Him into service and into a new purpose. And there's also no better night than tonight that if you're struggling and you feel like your ship is sinking and your net is breaking, to come forward that we can get that taken care of together. If you have need of any of these, come forward as we stand and sing our invitation song.